Brad? Monica? Hello? Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, hi, I'm Marilyn Lance.
Hi, Marilyn Lance.
Meeting you.
And your name?
I'm Charlie.
Hi, Charlie. Charlie, what's your last name?
Baker.
Thank you. Was that Monica?
On it.
I'm going to see if I can get this on my laptop. George?
Hi.
Hi. I got it on my cell and I just signed onto my laptop. I'm trying to see. I can't get any pictures on my laptop.
Yeah, Marilyn, looks like you're in stereo. You're in the flesh and blood in one screen, and you're
Yeah, that's
Yes,
okay.
I
It's not responding. I'll just sign off and just keep it on my cell. I'm having trouble with my laptop. Hi, David.
Hi, Marilyn. Yeah, your audio is loud and clear.
Yeah, so is my picture.
No, picture is good.
Yeah,
It's just
I thought there was a gentleman on here. His name was Charlie Baker.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
My name should be under my picture there.
Yeah. Are you a neighbor?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Which building?
I live on Connecticut Avenue.
Well,
Ellicott House.
We all, oh, you live in a house.
Ellicott House.
Oh,
Ellicott.
Ellicott. Right,
4849.
right.
Yeah, I used to live in that building.
it's a house with many houses.
Cute.
Yeah, sorry.
Well done, David. Okay.
Hi,
Hi, Monica.
I'm Monica.
Monica's back.
I was never gone. Did I go? Did I disappear or something?
I don't know.
Yeah, you did.
Yes.
Yeah.
For us, maybe not for you, but
So I don't know if we need to give it a few minutes or, I mean, this is going to be a small meeting, so I'm not sure how many people will be joining us. We deliberately kept it a tight meeting with the community. I see we have Commander Bedlion here.
Good evening.
How you doing there, Commander?
Good. How are you, Commissioner?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
And we have Commissioner Castile and then a number of folks from our various committees and residents and the ANC. So I don't know, David, did you want to start things off or do you want to let George kind of?
I mean, here's what we'll do. We'll call it tag team this. So yeah, my understanding, this is a meeting originating in part from the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee. And we've got George Hoffman, who's the chair. Marilyn Lance is here. And there's a Paul Smithskull.
Is Paul on?
Yeah, he's here. I don't want to botch his name too much. In any case, so we've been, over the kind of period of time, been talking about kind of concerns that we've had from a housing perspective and also from a safety perspective. And then as those conversations have evolved in terms of how to figure out how to kind of get better behavior from tenants generally, and then kind of the conversation about the service providers, the management company, and then kind of along came a spat of incidents, which have been some serious incidents in nature. And so that's, I guess the one of the points of this meeting is to figure out, kind of what's going on, and that's in part why you're here. And I don't know if there's any other, your staff are here. I don't know everybody on this call, but again, the idea was to, we've been talking about this issue within the community around safety and management and tenant behavior. And then we've had a spat of, again, some crime incidents that, again, some have been really serious. And so we wanted to kind of not necessarily equate the two, but at least this is the time to kind of come together and try and figure out, at least from a police perspective, sort of what you're seeing and kind of what's really happening. And then I think going forward is sort of problem solving in terms of how do we, how do we, in sort of short term and long term, how do we make this situation better? So that's a kind of a rambling, I don't know, George, did I miss anything?
Not really. We are probably having this meeting right now because of the events of December, which have followed one after the other within a few blocks. And increasingly, there's a police presence in our buildings, in our neighborhoods, on our streets. And we're disturbed, and it's problematic. It's very problematic. It's a very lucky thing in a way that there's no school attendance, because although a lot of these events happen at night, we don't want children affected. And to some extent, with Forest Hills Park being particularly vulnerable, they're affected anyway, as Paul can testify. So that said, I leave it to you.
Well, I'm one of the people that asked for this meeting, and what triggered it was numerous reports of gunshots overnight in the Forest Hills neighborhood, and to some extent in Chevy Chase, just north of Nebraska. And I've lived here for 20 years and never seen this kind of gunshot activity, which means something's going on here. And usually when there's guns in this city, drugs are closely connected. Maybe our captain can enlighten us on that, but I've also seen numerous incidents where one of the buildings along Connecticut Avenue between Albemarle and Ellicott will have as many as 6 police cars lined up in front of it with lights flashing for an hour at a time, which tells me there's something troublesome going on indoors.
So I guess let's start with the gunshots and the obvious increase in violence happening in our neighborhood.
Would you like me to jump in, Commissioner?
Yes, what can you tell us about all that?
Well, first let me start by thanking everyone. Thank you, Commissioner Nemeth. Thank you, Commissioner Castile, for having me on tonight. My name is Duncan Bedlion. I'm the commander of the 2nd Police District. And I'm also joined on the call by your newest captain for Sector 1, Captain Peter Frenzel. He joined us right around Thanksgiving, and I'm very eager to have him here as part of our team in 2D. And I also would like to thank all the citizens tonight who are on the meeting and who've shown a dedicated concern about your neighborhood. That is a privilege for me as a police supervisor. It's a privilege for all of us at our team here at 2D, because it tells us that we can work together to resolve these issues, which is absolutely fundamental in community policing relationships. It's working with you to hear what your concerns are and not stopping there, but continue to collaborate on how we can identify solutions. That's what we call a partnership for problem solving, and it's something that goes on tonight and it will continue. So I guess I will start with what we call sounds of gunshots. This is a type of call that we get by 911. And what we often find is that it typically involves more than one 911 call. And that was the case on December 19th. It was a Saturday, and it was around 11 p.m., 11:30 p.m. We received calls for what was described by citizens as sounds of gunshots in the 4600 block of Connecticut. We had 2 locations that were provided to us. One was in the rear of 4601 Connecticut, and then another location that was mentioned was the rear of 4607 Connecticut Avenue Northwest. So thankfully our officers were in the area very quickly. And as you can imagine, at 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday night, it was relatively quiet. There were a few cars and there were no pedestrians in the area at the time. However, as officers arrived in the area, they did identify one car driving in the 4600 block of Connecticut Avenue Northwest. 2D officers observed a traffic violation and engaged in a traffic stop. Subsequently, a gun was recovered from inside of that car and an arrest was made, a 25-year-old male by the name of Marcus Burton. And he was arrested for having a firearm that was not registered, and a fire that was often described as a illegal handgun in our city. And as the chief has mentioned on numerous occasions, illegal firearms are overwhelmingly involved in our violent crime, and we want to do everything we can to get those off the streets. Now, during the initial call, officers did not find any evidence of a victim, of any destruction of property from gunfire, nor any evidence. Now, this occurred late at night, 11:30 p.m. So one of the things that we do as part of our protocols is we like to go back and check during daylight time, where we can have a better view, more sunlight, and more ways to identify if there's any evidence. So on the very next day, Captain Frenzel, who's on this call, he assigned someone to follow up, and they did find some shell casings that belonged to basically bullets. We believe they were either fired or they fell from a car or something to that effect. We're not sure how they got there, but basically we think they were fired on the 911 calls that we received and the fact that the shell casings were there. So when we recover forensic evidence of some type of gunfire, whether someone's hurt, whether property is destroyed, or whether there's just gunfire and no reports of injury or destruction, we forensically examine the evidence. And we do everything we can to identify where those shell casings or where that gunfire came from. And we also seek to do everything we can to identify who fired that particular handgun. And we pursue those cases in every effort to identify the perpetrator, so that if it's appropriate, we make an arrest. So we obviously have the one arrest of the one firearm that same night. The next day we find shell casings, combined with the fact that there are 911 calls. So this case is still an open and active investigation, and we're going to continue to explore every angle in terms of how those shell casings from an illegal, most likely an illegal firearm, were there in the rear of 4607 Connecticut Avenue Northwest. Captain Frenzel has worked with the property management team, and we're going to continue to stay engaged with them to identify any problems that they may see occurring in or around the building. And as many folks have already mentioned on the call tonight, there have been some concerns about certain buildings, about police presence. So I do want to talk a little bit about some other crime in the area. And before I get into the crime, I'm going to talk about statistics. And statistics, when you talk about numbers, when you break them down, they are involving victims. And even though crime statistics in your particular neighborhood, in Patrol Service Area 203, where Van Ness, Forest Hills, Cleveland Park are situated, your crime statistics are low, but I want to provide a caveat with that, that anytime you're a victim of crime, it doesn't matter if crime overall is low, it doesn't matter if crime in the neighborhood is relatively small, you've been a victim of crime, and we need to take that seriously. So even though I want to talk about some numbers, I just want to reassure folks that if you're a victim of a crime, especially a violent crime, we're dedicated to doing everything we can to stop it in the future, and if it does happen, to identify the offender and place them under arrest. So in terms of violent crime, I'm going to talk a little bit about Patrol Service Area 203. You're currently down 12% in violent crime. Most of the categories this year are either down or are on par with last year's crime. One of the most high-profile events that happened not too far from the 4600 block Connecticut was in October of this year. There was a shooting and a death in the 4900 block Connecticut Avenue Northwest. That was a very shocking and heinous crime. It was under investigation by our dedicated team of homicide detectives who pursued the case very quickly and worked it extensively. They have since identified a person of interest, and they're working with our United States Attorney's Office on this case. At this time, we don't believe the public is exposed to any danger involving that particular homicide. So I just want to give them credit for the good work they're doing on that case. And as more information is developed, that will certainly be released to the public. In terms of some of the other violent crime, we're seeing actually a low amount of robberies in your neighborhood this year. So in the last 30 days, we've had no robberies. Calendar year, we've had 14 in PSA 203, and that's compared to 16 last year. So we're slightly down in that category. And I want to jump back briefly to the buildings that folks have talked about. So as we look at some of the crime statistic and we evaluate what's going on in your neighborhood, it's important to consider how we as a police department can partner with you, the community, to address these concerns. And when you look at crime, there's various ways that you can approach it from an enforcement perspective. You have a person who's involved as a victim, you have a person who's involved as a suspect or offender, and then you have a place where this crime may occur. And what that's often referred to as is the crime triangle. And as police departments work to address crime, they seek ways that they can address one aspect of the crime triangle to cause crime to go down and to be prevented. And I want to jump back to the buildings that folks have expressed concerns about. That's a great way for you to partner with your police managers. Captain Frenzel is the Sector 1 captain. And for your PSA, it's 203, that's Lieutenant Alexander. And what I encourage every citizen here to do is to partner with your area managers to identify what your concerns are. And if they are emanating from a building, we can reach out, we can work with you all to identify what those concerns are and to come up with solutions. And in today's climate, we're not always looking for a police or arrest-oriented solution. We're looking for solutions that involve various government agencies, various nonprofits, and the community to do everything we can to reduce the potential concerns about crime. So as folks have more questions, as you have more information to share, I think we can continue to partner going forward to identify some solutions when there are concerns about particular locations in your neighborhood. Now, I will say some of the police activity and most of the violent crime in your PSA has been related to domestic violence. So that's assaults with dangerous weapons, some robberies. A good chunk of those have involved domestic situations. And obviously those typically take place in residences. So that's something where we loop in various partners. We work with DC Safe to provide assistance to victims. And we also welcome other DC government agencies that can help us to do everything we can to provide resources to potential victims in those particular domestic matters. So I'm happy to answer some questions. I hope I didn't overwhelm you with all that information. And again, look forward to being part of the solution tonight.
I'm sorry to jump in here, but I must. Commander, I don't think it is right for you to be lecturing us this evening when we are here to try to find solutions. I have sat through a number of these speeches, and of course, we're all trying to do as you suggest. And some of us have already met with Lieutenant Alexander of your precinct and have gone far beyond what you're talking about, and you've not even mentioned it. We're here to find solutions, not to talk in generalities. I'm sorry to be so blunt, but this has to change. We cannot just have these same statistics and these lectures. It just doesn't work. I'm sorry to be sounding adamant, but it's not working. It's not working.
Well, Mr. Hoffman, that's okay. You can be adamant, and I welcome it. That's part of this process. But I think what's helpful for us is if we hear specifics. So is there a specific concern you'd like to talk about tonight?
Yes, there have been incidents at the Chesapeake, at the Brandywine. We know that many of these instances are underreported. We know that there's a discrepancy between how officers choose to note down occurrences. We know there's a big discrepancy between let's say a domestic violence situation, and when no charges are pressed, then that doesn't go anywhere, doesn't go on the record, nobody knows anything further about it. Now, David Lurie of Maryland, of the Brandywine Tenants Association, Marilyn Lance, my colleague here on this committee, and on the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee, and on the Brandywine Tenants Association, met with your Lieutenant Alexander, and we worked out several things that could be done. And I want to know whether they are being done and what the police department in day-to-day in this neighborhood is doing in terms of patrols, in terms of stepped up. You've mentioned nothing about that.
Well, I can tell you, so the one time we did have sounds of gunshots, our officers were right there and they did make an arrest for a gun recovery. So I do think that's important that that's noted. That's the only time we've had any documented incident of gunfire in that particular block. And our officers will thoroughly investigate and examine it. Now, and they've made special attention requests part of their routine. They go through there. I've personally driven in that neighborhood multiple times, and we're going to continue to be visible in that area. If you have concerns about particular crimes that are not being accurately documented, of course, we as supervisors need to be looped into that. And I'm happy to look into specifics.
The purpose of this meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to find ways of making finding solutions. This is not what you're talking about. Is not talking about finding solutions. I'm sorry.
Can I say something? I think that the key word here is prevention. When the police comes, it's already too late, even if arrests are made. We don't even want to get to the point where police is called. In my building, which is Chesapeake, in the past, I don't know, past 2 months or so there was the gun incident in December, and before that, I don't remember exactly when, there was a knife incident. I cannot believe that I'm living in this building because this is a recent development. I moved here in 2017. I was the happiest person. Everything was great. The building well maintained, safe, everything. We are having these problems. So I would like us to try to concentrate on how to prevent the problems from occurring and what is it that the police can help us with. Because management knows. I complained. I complained. I emailed the building manager, and they know. And the answer is the situation is under control because the police came and they arrested, or I don't know what they arrested the individual. I don't believe that the situation is under control because what is there to prevent another gunshot or another knife incident from happening? Nothing is being done. So I'm wondering, what is it that you can help management, building managers to do in order to make our environment safer? Because if you come, it's already after the fact. We need to know what can happen before the fact. I don't know. I don't think that anybody can agree with that.
Hi, may I say something?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm also a resident of the Chesapeake. And first, I'd like to say I'm new to this conversation, so I'm not sure what was said in the past about solutions or anything like that. But I do appreciate that we're having this conversation, and I do appreciate that the chief is here. You know, it seems like he's open to solutions. So I just wanted to give you my perspective, including an incident that happened last night, most recently. So I've been in the Chesapeake for about 7 years, in the VNS area for over 9 years. I have a young daughter who just started middle school. And prior to about a year or two ago, I felt like the Chesapeake and the surrounding area was the safest area in DC. Never had a concern any hour of the night. But the Chesapeake in particular, and Paul, who's also on this call and also a longtime resident there, we have noticed a significant change in the environment. Everything from domestic violence, littering, noise complaints, as you mentioned, the previous speaker, stabbings. And the Chesapeake did implement a new process where they have a guard at night, I think from like 7 p.m. until a certain hour. So I think that's a positive step. And I think part of the challenge is, like yesterday, for example, it was about 6 p.m. And for about an hour, there was this really loud party. And it was not so much the music, which was annoying, but it was the cursing and that my daughter could clearly hear from her bedroom. And so I called the police. And the police arrived, and I think other people were complaining too, and the concierge might have gone up to talk to the person. So by the time the police arrived, the noise was stopped. And I understand the police's hands are tied too, right? In situations like that, they arrived. I thought they arrived fairly quickly, and but by then there's no more noise, right? So I was dealing with the noise. My daughter was dealing with the noise for a while. By the time we called the police and they got here, the noise stopped. So the police really don't have, the authority to arrest anyone in that situation. But it is like trying to figure out, even walking the streets by Forest Hill Playground now, you see people smoking pot in Forest Hill Playground. You see people smoking pot in cars by Forest Hills Playground. You see, not to like make generalizations, but you do see some what look like shady things, like people just hanging out, loitering in that area, and cars with tinted windows. And so I think it's just, trying to come up with solutions. Again, I haven't been privy to the previous conversation, so I don't know if we're just repeating, trying to come up with solutions and nothing gets done. But I think this conversation, at least from my perspective, is helpful.
Yeah, I agree. It's helpful. And Commander, you were saying something about increased police presence or visibility. Perhaps that would help. Is it possible? Because these individuals in our building, to me, it's a surprise that so many other buildings are going through the same situation. They don't feel intimidated. They don't feel discouraged by anything. But I think that if they saw more police presence, without them knowing when the police presence is going to be, maybe we're going to feel a little safer. I know you cannot convince management to hire a guard during the day. I made that suggestion and I didn't receive a response. and I don't think that you have the power to do so. What kind of concrete suggestions do you have about how to work with the building management to make them more responsive to our complaints?
So the volume faded there a little bit. Did you ask what tactics do I recommend to make management more responsive to your concerns?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about working together, collaborating. Yeah, so what does this mean in concrete? You know,
That's a great question. And that's a great place where we can start. So as has been made abundantly clear, we've heard a few buildings named tonight. And my experience as a police supervisor tells me, as a community and as a police department, let's work on what those concerns are. Do we have anybody representing the Brandywine, the Chesapeake, the Saratoga on the meeting tonight?
Yes.
Yes.
And Mr. Hoffman, you're on the tenant association, and Ms. Lance, are you?
I'm on the board with George in the Brandywine. Yes, we're on the tenant association.
So no one with building security, no one representing the management of the apartments?
I don't think there's any managers of any apartment buildings here tonight. Is that correct, George?
Correct.
Yeah.
They weren't.
I have a question for the
Can I answer
commander.
Ms. Kohler's question real quick?
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
So as far as recommended tactics, one of the agencies that we need to incorporate on this is the Office of Attorney General. They have a nuisance section, and it's based on a old law that allows citizens like yourselves to go before the Office of Attorney General and say, hey, we believe this property is becoming a criminal nuisance. Then the Office of Attorney General looks at a lot of things. They look at what type of gun crimes have been committed, what type of evidence of firearms at play, narcotic violations, and other calls for service that require heavy demand from the police. So that's one recommended tactic that I encourage you all to look at. That's the Office of Attorney General. The other aspect of this is you have a series of dedicated public servants in the mayor's office through the MOKers. For Ward 3, I've worked with Tony Donaldson on a number of matters. He's very helpful. And it's also worth looping in the constituent services out of Councilmember Che's office as well, so that they're aware of these particular concerns. So again, MPD, we're always going to show up. We're going to be on every meeting that you ask us to attend, but it's always more helpful when we loop in our interagency partners. But from what you're telling me, I think Office Attorney General, if we can loop them in and make them aware, Captain Burnett, who recently retired, I know he made them aware of some of the concerns that were emanating from the Chesapeake and the Saratoga buildings during the summertime. But again, that's more helpful if we have the citizens engaged and involved in that process. So that's something that we can work on, and we can walk down that road with the Office of Attorney General to see if they can provide some other enforcement help from another agency. So those are just a couple things. I also recommend community walks, regular community walks. I know it's a pandemic and people may be hesitant to be out there with their police officers right now in groups, but we can do that through a socially distanced fashion with masks. And it'll allow our officers and our managers and our supervisors to see up close and personal what you're dealing with there. That's a couple of recommendations.
That last one?
Excuse me?
What is that last one?
A community walk. We just schedule regular community
Right, okay.
with concerned tenants.
Got it, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the second one. So I got the Attorney General and the community walks, but I didn't get your second suggestion.
Yes.
You were saying that we should contact.
Oh, yes. So the
But I didn't
Mayor's
get
Office of Community Relations, MOKers, M-O-C-R, I hope I got that acronym right. Tony Donaldson is the Ward 3 representative. And then it's also helpful to make sure that constituent services out of Councilmember Che's office is aware as well. Because they want to hear, they want to help provide assistance when other government agencies need to become involved. So those
community relations broker. And do you have a name?
Yeah, Tony Donaldson is the Ward 3.
Tony Donaldson.
And Let me see if I can.
Something about Ward 3 is, so he is the representative for Ward 3?
Yes,
Okay,
and
thank you.
there's a website, it's mocrs.dc.gov.
MOCRS at, I'm sorry,
.dc.gov.
.dc.gov. Thank you.
So I want to give time for other questions. Ms. Lance, you said you had a question?
Yeah, I do. I got a couple. One, you said you were going to talk about specific buildings, and under the Brandywine is one of them. But besides that, help me understand how the statistics, I know they're difficult, that it appears to be going down. I jotted down some of the ones that you gave this evening, but the citizens and the residents of Forest Hills, Van Ness, and all these areas in Ward 3 are seeing things differently than the statistics apparently are showing. The reason why I asked that, as a member of the board, one of the responsibilities I have is on a monthly basis, I go through your FOIA department and all that and get monthly statistics for just my building, the Brandywine. And I know that there are some things, because of the Freedom of Information Act, that can't be shared. And I don't want to know that. And I don't think any of the board members want to know it. But all of a sudden, on a monthly basis, we'll get a report that on any given day, there's 4, 5, 6 police cars and an ambulance in the drive, and it makes all the residents nervous, but we don't know what the issue is. Is there some way that you can help me or our board without giving up personal, private information, make the determination so that we can calm the residents down that perhaps wasn't a violent crime? Maybe somebody just called because they fainted. Police appear or come for different reasons. Maybe the numbers are look like they're so out of balance, and it's been going up, up, up for the last 2 or 3 years, that we think maybe there's not as much happening in our building that we think it is. So is there some way you can perhaps help me with, when I get the statistics, that it really wasn't any domestic violence, or it wasn't a mugging, or somebody didn't get robbed? Is there any way you can help me with that?
Yeah, I just sent, that's a great question, Ms. Lance. I sent 2 links to the chat to everyone. The first one is the dc.atlas link, which allows citizens to pull up crime statistics directly yourselves. You don't have to wait for me to give you the information, or your lieutenant or captain. You can look it up at any time. It's a very helpful map. And then the second link is, it says mpdc.dc.gov, and it mentions join MPD Google group. So every day we send out emails of all the crimes that were reported, and that we
I'm on that list. I get that every morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you asked a good question.
But
how do I identify
some of the
those
things that
crimes?
happen in the building?
So I want to get to that, because
sorry.
it's a little nuanced. We are required to report out on certain crimes, but then there are also responses from the police that do require 2 cars. We call it, that the term we use is their 10-4, it's 2 officers. And they can involve a sick person that's going to the hospital. They can involve a domestic dispute where there's no crime, but there's a domestic verbal dispute. And those types of incidents, again, they're not crimes. We do not report those out on. And it's not something that we're going to reveal private personal information just because someone was involved in a domestic dispute.
Right.
Now, I realize
Right.
That may not be fully reassuring when you see police cars come into your building, but at the same time, we have to honor the privacy and concerns that citizens have.
Absolutely,
But
absolutely.
we can also answer your questions as well. So you can reply emails to that Google group. We also put high profile incidents on Nextdoor. So if you go to the Nextdoor social media website, I gave a description today of an arson that took place in Georgetown, and our officers
Yes.
were there and made an arrest. So those are a few ways
Saw
that we
that.
provide information. And I think the best way to really stay engaged as citizens, if you see an uptick in activity, is to talk to your captain and lieutenant. I know, Mr. Hoffman, you said you've been speaking to Lieutenant Alexander, and we have a new captain here. And even your area officers, just having community walks, as I mentioned earlier, that's a good way to get a good gauge of what's going on. Because officers are going to go to calls regardless of what they're for. That's what we get paid to do, and it's an honor and privilege to do so. But your officers that do community walks with you, that meet
I'm
you-
sorry, I have one
tell you what's
last
going on.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one last question, and then I'll shut up. In your experience and your background, why do you think that in the last 3 years that there has been a significant uptick in crime, noise, violence, everything in this community? Just based on your experience, it's been going up. It's obvious. You can walk out in the street and you can see it. Just like people say in the park, you can see it. All over Connecticut Avenue, you can see it. You walk down Soapstone Trail, you can see it. Dirt all over the street. Shopping carts all over the street, noise, crime. Why do you think there's been that uptick since probably mid to late 2016 up to today?
That's a great question. There are always theories about why crime goes up. Some of those theories are routinely scrutinized and can provide us better insight. I can tell you that illegal firearms are being recovered at a very high pace. So when we see violent crime involving shootings across the city, there's a direct correlation to illegal firearms. As our soon-to-be outgoing Chief Newsham has stated on multiple occasions, there's a strong correlation to shootings and people that have been arrested for having.
So are you saying it's happening all over the city? My concern is right now, Ward 3, Forest Hill, Van Ness, Cleveland Park. There's been a significant uptick in those types of incidents in the last 2.5, 3 years. And I guess I just kind of need your guidance or your expertise to perhaps tell us why it is.
Well, to be honest, there's not a good answer as why certain quality of life crimes become more apparent. So what you're describing, shopping carts, smoking marijuana, it's unclear why those certain particular quality, what we call quality of life.
Gunshots on Saturday night. Somebody killed a couple of months ago. I walked into the Giant the other day. I've lived on Connecticut Avenue for 20 plus years. Never saw armed guards in the Giant at 4301 Connecticut. Sunday, I go to do some shopping. There's 2 guards at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. There's so much shoplifting. There's so much. Why is the neighborhood changing?
So one of the issues you described was marijuana usage. There is a misunderstanding about the law. It's illegal to smoke marijuana on public space. We spend a decent amount of our time educating folks on that. We share information through various platforms so that folks don't smoke marijuana, but that is a call for service that we've seen increase in that neighborhood. What we need from you all as citizens is to call. So we often get these complaints on meetings. If you see the smoking of marijuana openly in the public, on public space, in parks, in cars, on the street, that's still a crime. And while it's not something that we're going to arrest our way out of, we need to know where those hot spots are brewing. So if you call us, you let us know, you work with area managers, we can deploy our officers to get into the area and hopefully foil it all together. But what we find is certain people still want to go outside and smoke marijuana, and that's been a challenge, not just in Forest Hills and Van Ness, but throughout the entire city. And we're going to continue to work to educate folks that that's illegal. So that's one particular issue that you mentioned. As far as the quality of life, the shopping carts, I think you said dirt on the sidewalks, that's something where we're going to partner with other government agencies to work to identify some solutions. But the police themselves, we're not going to be well involved in those particular issues.
And Commander, I just want to point out that we have a couple of questions in the chat room we have one from Marcia. And I don't know if Marcia, if you just want to simply state your question on.
Sure. Hi, this is Marcia. I've lived in this neighborhood for over 22 years now. I currently live in the Park Van Ness, and my question involves the status of the Days Inn. So earlier in the year when the COVID quarantine started, the Days Inn decided that they were going to lease out rooms as a COVID quarantine location. They didn't inform anyone of that. Even Mary Che was surprised. At some point, they stopped being used as a quarantine overflow center. And now, at least for the past 6 months, because I could see it outside my window, all hours of the days and night, there's police cruisers out there. There's any number of things, but I was just wondering what if any, if you could offer any information about what the Days Inn is doing. I'm a bit curious and kind of confused.
So other than what you mentioned in terms of the COVID protocols, I'm not aware of any recent operational changes at the Days Inn. We do get a decent amount of calls for service in that block. Sometimes it's related to the establishment, sometimes it's not. But that's not something that we're going to be involved in. If we get concerns from the community, we can work with you all to reach out to them and to partner with you to find out if there's some solutions that they can offer. But we're not going to go knock on the door of Days Inn and find out what exactly are they doing operationally necessarily. But again, it's something if you're saying it's a concern, we will gladly partner with you. And that's something we can do in a community walk. The last one I recall was in January. And the main complaints, and this was with various government officials, this was a core community walk with the mayor's office. The primary complaints we received in that area involved traffic. At the time, we didn't get any complaints about the Days Inn. So with you sharing that with me, I think it's important that we collaborate and we go and talk to them, and we'll assist you to meet with them, and we'll assist you to come up with some solutions. But I think it's more helpful if the community is engaged on that rather than the police just going and trying to come up with solutions ourselves.
Oh, what you're saying is that you're not getting calls to the Days Inn for police matters specifically.
I'm sorry, was that a question for me?
Well, yeah, so because what it sounds like, I mean, Marsha is saying that she sees a lot of activity on the block, but you're saying that that you're not going to the Days Inn specifically on police matters. It's just, she might just see the MPD vehicles on the block.
Yeah, so we have had some calls at that particular hotel.
Okay.
As far as complaints from the community about it, I don't recall a significant spike other than during the COVID protocols that were mentioned earlier by Marcia. But again, it's helpful that we hear this stuff and that our officers can be engaged with you all to be aware of any potential concerns. So, for example, before there's a serious crime, we want to be able to get in there and find out what's going on. So I'm not clear on what the exact issue is with Days Inn, but we're happy to explore it.
And there's just operating as a regular hotel as far as I know. We haven't been, I mean, I have not been informed of any change in their status. That, I mean, have you heard anything?
I have not.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought, because that, I mean, they stopped operating as a COVID facility back in July, I believe.
Yeah, I've been there once. I was driving through and there was a call there. It was someone who had overconsumed alcohol. That's the only time I've been there for a particular 911 call, and we provide assistance. It was primarily ambulance related. But that's the only thing that jumps to my mind. But again, if there are concerns, we definitely want to work with you all to identify them and to partner with solutions.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question here from Caitlin Hughes. So Caitlin, I'll just let you go ahead and ask away. And you're on mute.
Thank you very much. My daughter's 14. She was previously attacked in Fort Reno Park, and I recognize that's Park Police jurisdiction. They actually they didn't pursue it really because the attacker was another teen, which was disappointing to say the least. But she walks a lot. She's petite. She's been followed by cars, people, and I'm trying to figure out what she can do to be safe. And she uses the Citizen app, which is a social media self-reporting app when people see things or hear things. And it doesn't appear that the police reports link into that, but it would be really nice if you would look into whether what you guys tweet out for active crimes underway, like the stuff we see on Twitter, could be fed into the Citizen app as well. So the kids have kind of a one-stop shop. And then also, just wondered if there's anything that you recommend that kids do to be safe. I don't obviously want to tell her she can't walk around the neighborhood, but I know there was a stabbing right at Nebraska and Chesapeake last week on a Tuesday night at 6:45.
Get out of here.
It was a knife with sexual assault. So we live in the Parker House. We're at 4700 Connecticut. So one block up, I see the police cars all the time because I walk the dog at 1 or 2 in the morning. Very quickly, very, very alert. But in general, I just wondered if there's stuff that you guys can do, maybe step up the roving patrols instead of just the parked vehicles. But I do thank you for the increased lighting on 36th where the carjacking or stolen car had occurred. That was a really dark block, and I think it's gotten better. And I have seen police cars up and down the new pedestrian slow area on 36th, which is also great. So some good stuff is happening, but what do you have in particular for kids to help make them safe?
That's a great question. So in terms of safety for kids, in terms of alerts, I just sent a link out for the HC and the DC alert. That's linked into the information that comes out via Twitter and some of our other social media apps. So I recommend that everyone sign up for the DC alert system so you'll get real-time alerts involving certain crimes in the District of Columbia and in 2D. That's one recommended helpful tool that you can use. In terms of kids, I think overall the parks are outstanding in the District of Columbia, particularly in Ward 3. And we do have various police programs. So there's SRO programs that are led at the schools, and we also have Youth and Family Services Division, which is a citywide unit within MPD, and we execute various programs throughout the year. Now, unfortunately, with the pandemic, it's been limited, but there are ways to partner with the police to get to know your local police better. There's the Jelliff Boys and Girls Club down in Glover Park off Wisconsin Avenue, where we have our officers stop in. We're actually working with them to find ways to be more engaged with after-school activities and for young people to get to know their local police better. Those are a few things that come to mind. If I think you said your daughter's 14, Ms. Hughes, she can also participate in a ride-along to kind of get an idea of what officers go to on a daily basis. And I find that also is a helpful way for both young people and slightly more mature people to see what's going on in their city. Those are just a few options. Of course, being close to Rock Creek Park, I take my kids there all the time. I live in Ward 5, but we go there and we have a great fun time hiking the trails. So those are just a few things. I hope I answered your question sufficiently.
Not, well, those are interesting programs, but that's not really what I'm looking for. I mean, I'm talking about walking on Chesapeake from Connecticut to Wisconsin. How can a kid stay safe? She's got her phone, which she knows not to be distracted by. She's not on it while she's walking. She's alert. She's got mace, which I don't know if it's illegal, but she's got it. Or it's pepper spray, actually. I don't know if it's mace. She's got a stabby thing and a button she can press that, like is super loud. So she's got all these tools, but nevertheless, she gets followed and catcalled and other stuff. So, I'm just wondering if you can step up the roving patrols, the just driving around a lot, because even if she did a ride along, if there's no police around visible, then it's hard for her to flag down her friendly police officer. I will say I had to go out on Christmas Eve to get flour, or maybe it was the day before, and you guys have a great presence in front of the Wawa late at night. It's really good. I felt totally safe there. But there is this sort of no man's land between Wisconsin and Connecticut where I'm just kind of concerned. Would love to see more patrols just kind of driving around irregularly.
And you bring up a great point. Thank you for sharing that. So in terms of what you're specifically asking me as far as your daughter's public safety and her awareness, what you said is number one, not talking on the cell phone, paying attention to her surroundings, because we do find that there's a correlation in our crime, that the suspects who go out and commit these crimes are looking for victims that are unaware, victims that are not fully paying attention to their surroundings. So that's number one. Your daughter is doing a very good job in maintaining her awareness, and that is very helpful and is key to public safety. It sounds like you said she already has a device to alert people that gets loud. Did I understand that correctly? That makes some kind of noise. Also very helpful. And as far as the dichotomy of what you're describing, officers at certain places like the Wawa, you're talking about the Wawa in Wisconsin Avenue?
Yeah. Next to Whole Foods.
Next to Whole
Across
Foods.
from Wilson.
Yeah.
And then, I think you said no man's land between Wisconsin and Connecticut, right? So we need to balance that as a local police district. We want to patrol everywhere. No area should not feel adequately patrolled, but at the same time, we also dedicate our resources to the areas that get the most calls, the most crime.
Sure.
So it's a fine balance, but our officers, they are going everywhere, and there's just maybe certain areas where you tend to see them more, like the Wawa, like other areas. And if there's a certain street where it seems like you're not seeing the police, let your area supervisors know so that we can communicate that to our officers. One of the streets that I heard about late 2019 was McKinley Street between Wisconsin and Connecticut. We communicated that to our officers and we didn't hear any complaints about it afterwards. So if you're seeing specific blocks or specific streets that you feel are unattended, we got to do a better job of being visible in that area, and please just let us know. We'll work to identify ways that we can improve our patrols in the area.
All right, well, I greatly appreciate that. I think the one suggestion I would have for you then is to have some of the police loop the block from Chesapeake around Wilson and then back up by the Wawa, just keep looping that block. Because I've anecdotally seen a lot of attacks on that corner of Nebraska and Chesapeake that have occurred in the last 3 years. So it seems like they're just the other side of the high school from where you have a strong police presence. And that's where some shenanigans are happening or worse. So if they could maybe do the looping of the block, that might be helpful.
Thank you. And we did make an arrest in reference to that attack. I just wanted to let folks know that our officers got in the area quickly.
Yep, great.
It was a heinous
Thanks.
crime, and they made an arrest. And that individual was prosecuted, or his case was papered, excuse me.
Thank you again. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Ms. Hughes.
And we have, Charlie's going to have some questions as well, but I also noticed that Paul had mentioned something in a chat to me. I mean, he sent as a direct message where he said he had found some used condoms in the grass next to the Forest Hills playground, and wondering, well, Paul, I mean, I'll let you kind of maybe just bring that up about potential prostitution even happening.
Oh, I don't know. That was just an idea, just a thought I had. I also sent that to the commander in a private chat as well. So I was just wondering if he's heard about that or seen that as well.
I have not received any complaints, and thank you, Paul, for sharing that about prostitution at the park. We do make arrests for what we call indecent exposure. So that may not involve prostitution, but it involves people engaged in indecent acts or indecent exposure on public space. We made an arrest just recently. I think the last one was in Georgetown last week. So we will make arrests for it. And if we see it, we definitely have zero tolerance for it. So we'll keep an eye out for that. That I would imagine that's something that may be taking place late at night. And we'll be on the lookout for that.
And then I know, Charlie, you've been waiting kind of patiently. I've seen your note there, so it's all yours for your questions.
Okay, so my question has to do with, to what extent are the problems in recent years due to people from outside of Ward 3 coming into Ward 3? For example, you recovered a gun when you stopped a car the other night. I think it was December 23rd outside of the 4600 block of Connecticut. Was that a local car or was that a car from some other part of the city?
So that individual that was arrested, he gave an address that was not in Ward 3. He had a few addresses, but his most recent address was the 1400 block of Tewksbury Place Northwest.
So this is, I'm getting into some rather controversial topics here because we've had various discussions on the Nextdoor app, and people have strong emotions on all sides of this issue, but it seems to a number of us that many of the problems that we've been seeing here in this strip of Connecticut Avenue are tied, at least time-wise, with an influx of new residents who have been moved from elsewhere in the city, and often they're referred to as program people. And I don't want to accuse those people themselves as being the problem, although I do hear from my friends who live in some of the buildings that have heavy percentages of program people that sometimes they are the problem, but they all have friends who come from other parts of the city. There was an incident at the Brandywine where there was a man found sleeping in the trash room. And when he was asked what he was doing there, he said, "Oh, I know somebody in this building." And I'm thinking, yeah, that reminds me of some things that happened here 10 years ago. And I'm just wondering whether we have a problem with trying to mix two rather disparate socioeconomic groups together, which, for lack of, to oversimplify it, a high crime neighborhood and a low crime neighborhood. And what we're seeing is the high crime migrating into the low crime. And this is obviously not a problem that is caused by the police in any way, but by city leadership and certain housing policies. And I'm wondering what the solution is. I'm disappointed that no member of the city's council or other authority is present at this meeting, but that's sort of my concern, that the problems we're seeing are different, from what I can tell, than they were 5 years ago when Chief Lanier came over and had a town hall at the Forest Hills Old Folks Home because of armed robberies on Connecticut Avenue, because then it was definitely people who came over by car, collected wallets and cell phones, and immediately fled back over to the eastern side of the city. This seems more
Did Charlie freeze, or is that just me?
I think he froze.
I was gonna say, I think it's Charlie because I see everybody else moving. I hear everybody else.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if Charlie can hear me. It looks like he might have gone offline.
But I think he brings up a good point. So he brings up a very good point.
So with his question, that is an example where I believe other government agencies need
Yes.
to be incorporated into the solution.
Absolutely.
As a police commander, I don't think I am properly equipped to answer his question. What I will tell Charlie and everyone on the meeting tonight is we are going to do everything we can to foil violent crime. And I think we have a dedicated team of officers that work to identify those small percentage of offenders. And I would encourage people to keep it in mind. It's a small percentage of violent offenders that commit a large portion of the violent crime in your neighborhood and throughout the city. And we have a dedicated team of officers. Back in May and through parts of the summer, further south from your neighborhood in Cleveland Park, we saw a relatively significant spree of robberies. And by significant, I'd say there was about 5. And we quickly identified who the key offenders were, made arrests, and then we saw that robbery spree stopped. So Cleveland Park, which is in your patrol service area, Van Ness, Forest Hills, we haven't had a robbery there in the last 30 days. And I think it's been even close to 60 days. So we do find that if there are a sudden increase in crime, violent crime, once we identify those perpetrators, they stop. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to work to identify the violent perpetrators. In terms of the other concerns, we will be a part of the conversation when it involves the need for MPD to address public safety concerns, but we're also going to invite, or we're going to encourage you to invite the other partners and stakeholders that need to be present. And we will be part of the conversation, but we will not be driving the conversation related to the concerns that Charlie shared.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, this kind of came together, this meeting, kind of quickly, and it happened right in the middle of the holiday season as well, which sort of, made things a little difficult to get folks together. But, I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation between all of us, in the community and all the partners, and hopefully we can do something like this again.
What I'd like to recommend, if it's okay with you, Commissioner Nemeth, is I'd like to invite the folks that are part of this meeting tonight to work together, identify a date where you as a community can come together and walk with one of your area supervisors and some officers to show up close and in person what you're seeing. Because everyone on this meeting, you are the eyes and ears before the police are, because you live there every day and you know when things change. And it'll give us a chance to see it from your perspective, and it'll give you a better opportunity to get to know some of your officers and area supervisors. So I would like to invite you, if you would make adjustments for me to identify a date where as many people can attend. We'll wear masks, we'll socially distance, and MPD will be present alongside of you to see what these concerns are and to do a better job of working with you to identify solutions.
And I personally love that idea. Last year I was part of the mayor's community walk in January in Van Ness, and I remember when that was scheduled, I thought to myself, really, in the middle of winter, like, really, we're going to do this in January? And it wound up being a gorgeous day.
Yep.
And so hopefully we'll find a day in January and it'll wind up being just as gorgeous, because we know how bad it can get in January. But I think it's a wonderful idea, and we should definitely.
I would agree. And then maybe it's a Saturday. We can pick a Saturday, and if it's nice, we can do it. If not, we can reschedule to the next Saturday. Because I think walking up the street and actually having police officers and us, and maybe by that time we'll have Gloria from Van Ness and somebody from Mary Chay's office, and we can kind of walk in so you can sort of see what's going on.
Hey, David, while you're there, David and Monica and George, I'm just kind of thinking here, I think we ought to continue on with this discussion in the second meeting. And I think it would be vital to have property management folks and definitely somebody from the city. I don't know if it's this Donaldson guy, Anita Bonds, Mary Che, I don't know, but I think that's probably, don't you think that's the next step?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think we absolutely need to have Tony Donaldson from the MOCR, for our MOCR, and definitely someone from Mary Che's office at the very least.
Yeah, and the management companies too, because I do, again, I
Yes.
know we've got a great representation of people that live at these buildings, but we haven't, I mean, again, at least I'm speaking for myself, I haven't really had any conversations with the management folks. I know you all have, but I think they've got to be because they're the ones, I mean, it's a logic, they see who they're renting to. And I think they've got to, and I know you guys have had conversations and it's probably been frustrating, but I think I think it's time for us to kind of get together, and it's not just a Brandywine, but it's a Brandywine and Chesapeake. And if it's Ellicott House or whatever these other places are, I think we've got to get us all together and kind of start having this, how do we start problem solving around this?
Great.
And maybe, like you say, Monica, Tony Donaldson is probably if there's one representative of the city who can sort of, kind of, from whatever the housing authority and the housing department, I think he's probably the one person that we would have first. And then, if there's specific issues with specific agencies, then we can have, that would be a follow-up conversation, but at least to have Tony Donaldson would be maybe a first step from the city's perspective.
Well, certainly Tony would represent, let's call it the executive side of the house,
Okay.
representing the mayor's side of the house. But I think to have council representation, someone from Mary Che's office would also be valuable, and that's what I would reach out to her office and get someone. I mean, also, let's face it, Mary lives in the neighborhood. I mean, so she has as much a vested interest in this just purely as a resident.
And will you extend the invitation to the management companies, please?
I say, yes, let's do that. I have no relationship with them. So I would ask for your assistance with that, George and Marilyn, and
Absolutely.
people on the phone, people in the meeting, because I don't know the people at the management offices. Like, I don't know who to even contact there. I think you're closer to.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think I don't know, it's, I think the best, one way is for, let's say, George, if you know the manager, George and Marilyn, you know the manager of the Brandywine, and just send him or her a message and copy us and say, hey, just link us electronically. Or if you have their name and number, whatever the best way to contact is, I think we can pick up the phone and call them or email them or,
Sure.
but, yeah.
Okay, great.
So
Thank you.
could I interject something here?
Oh, yes, Charlie, welcome back.
Sorry, my building's Wi-Fi deteriorates after dinner because everybody starts streaming video and whatnot. And so I've finally loaded this app onto my phone and put it on the cellular network. But one of the problems you're going to find with contacting the management offices is they are skittish because of the city. There are people in the DC Housing Authority who have put pressure on the management offices not to make waves over this issue. And so I'm not sure what the solution is, but I don't think we're going to have a meeting with management offices or their parent management companies, like Borger Management, who does, I think they do the Brandywine nowadays, used to do this building, but no longer do. I mean, I don't know that Tom Borger is going to permit his manager to attend this kind of a meeting because it'll get him in trouble with the housing authority.
Ariana Borger had already agreed to a meeting, except that she's away for the holiday.
Okay.
So
Yeah, let's give it a try. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I think, but yeah, let's give it a try.
I agree.
I mean,
Yeah.
let's be really blunt. The Housing Authority has held some meetings where they have invited the gentleman that has written the article couple of years ago for the Washington City paper to give a presentation on what happened at Fort Reno in the 1930s and 1940s. And that was a terrible thing. I actually was quite familiar with that before any of this started. But to say that because of that, we're going to do this, there's emotions that get wrapped up, and the word racism gets tossed out somewhat gratuitously, and people are intimidated from speaking.
True.
Agree.
Agreed.
Well,
But somehow we've got to work around it.
Yes.
I don't know if work around it is the right word, but everything you said, Charlie, is so true. But we're living it every day, and it is totally unfair to us as citizens, residents of the district, to have to not make people aware of it. That's why I think it will be in our best interest, even though they may not want to hear it, is to make sure that city officials are at that next meeting or our next meeting, because you're right, they put their blinders on, it's all about money and financing and all that, but they need to hear it from us.
Yeah, and I'm still smarting from the brief TV interview of the man who's running the city's coronavirus response back when the Days Inn was first brought to public light by NBC4. And he showed up with a bunch of guys to get rid of the medical waste. They shoved a microphone in his face, and he unwisely responded by saying, the people of Ward 3 better get used to the fact that they've had a protected existence for the last 50 years.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. I saw him on TV last night on a different matter, and it reminded me of that whole thing.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I guess there's at least two next steps, right? Monica, I'm kind of looking at you, and is one, I guess we'll try to schedule this walk in sometime in January, probably on a Saturday. And
Saturday would be best, I think.
And that's with us and probably somebody from Mary Che's office, and then Mr. Donaldson from the city. And then I think a second next up is really this, I guess it's a meeting with us. And I don't know if Commander, if you want to be there, or Lieutenant Alexander or somebody from your office, and then with the management companies, again, to try and have this, it's somewhat the similar conversation, but again, more focused on kind of, sort of what they're seeing and kind of what we can do. And again, if there's, getting back to Charlie here, is, I understand that, they may feel pressure from the city, whoever's funding them, but it doesn't, obviously if it gets to a point where people are upset and there's complaints, it's not, it doesn't matter what pressure is, eventually the community is going to say no. And so I think they have to understand it's in their interest to make these programs work, because if they don't work, they're not going to be welcome here. I don't know any other way to put it.
Does anybody know if if landlords get some kind of advantages from allowing low-income tenants who are paid by the city, whose rents are not paid by themselves, obviously? There should be some advantages there, tax advantages, something, because I spoke with my building manager in Chesapeake, and she assured me that the individuals who cause all this trouble are as entitled as I am.
I'm sorry, you're fading in and out. She assured you what?
That the individuals who cause trouble in my building are are as qualified as I am for living in this building. But I qualify only because I have a certain salary level. Those
Mhm.
people are teenagers. They don't have a salary level.
Mhm.
They don't qualify for themselves. They qualify by virtue of being supported by the city.
Mhm.
I am sure that landlords get something out of it. There's something for them. There's an advantage. I don't know what it is. I was wondering if anybody knows.
Well, it's not that there's an advantage in per se, it's under the law, you cannot discriminate
Right.
source of income. And so if someone is paying via a housing voucher, that is as good as any other, and you cannot use that as a criteria.
Yeah.
Illegal to disqualify someone because they would be using a housing voucher. That's just,
Right.
so,
I don't see the way out.
Well, let's have a conversation with them. I mean, it's interesting to speculate or to sort of think what's in it for them. Well, why don't we just ask them point blank?
well, what's in it for them is they
I
get
agree.
better
That's why we
security.
should have a meeting with management.
That's what we're recommending. That's
Yeah.
exactly what we're saying.
Yes,
I'm just saying that I agree and that I just brought up a point, but I totally agree with the strategy.
Okay.
Great.
Anything else?
so
good
Commander,
order.
you're gonna get back to us with some proposed Saturdays? Is that what I'm thinking, or do you want us to come up with a proposed date for this community walk? How do we figure
Well,
that?
it's there's a calendar. I think everybody's got a calendar, and I think
Oh, I
there's.
was asking that to the commander, David.
Yes, if you could find some dates
Oh,
that work for you all, I would humbly ask you to avoid the week of the 17th through the 23rd. We're going to be busy.
what's going on?
Gee, what could possibly be happening then?
Yes, we'll just be a little bit occupied.
Yeah.
But whatever date works for you all, we will be present. It may be someone different due to scheduling, but there will be a supervisor, there will be officers there. And we look forward to being alongside of
I
all.
mean,
of you.
I appreciate that. It seems like, practically there's 2 Saturdays. So there's a Saturday before and there's a Saturday after. Those are 2 Saturdays in January. I don't know what
Dates.
it does.
The 12th looks promising. That's a possibility.
So the 16th and the 30th.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong month. Yes, well, we could do the 9th or the 30th. Yeah, January 9th or the 30th.
Okay, either one.
So
Anybody
what's those of you that are here, what do you think? The 30th, think it'll be a chance to be warmer or be colder?
It's DC.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
I was going to say, who knows in Washington, D.C.?
It's winter time.
Well, we could, I don't know, we could try for the 9th, and then if it doesn't work, we could flip to the 30th. How's that?
Great, perfect.
Okay.
Great.
Because, this Saturday was brutal, and look at today was a gorgeous day when I took the dog out for a walk. You can't tell.
Yes. So when you settle on date, just email Captain Frenzel. He sent his email to the chat, and he will make sure a supervisor is there as well as a couple of officers in the area, and just pick a location to meet, and we'll be there.
Okay,
So let's tentatively go for the 9th, and then we can send details. How
Sorry,
does that sound?
I'm having trouble understanding right now. Please try
Okay.
it later.
Saturday, January 9th, at a time and place to
To
be
be
determined.
determined.
Thanks, Marilyn.
And how much time should we budget for this? Like in terms of like 2 hours or 3 hours?
I think that would be enough, don't you?
hour and a half.
90 minutes.
Well, what do you think is the right amount of time for a walk like this typically?
Hour and a half, come on.
Commander, what do you think is the right amount of time for a walk like
90 minutes is more than enough.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
And then since we're on a roll here, so is it like a 10:30 to noon, or is it a 1:30 to 3? What do you think the best?
10:30 to noon.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I was gonna vote afternoon only because better chance of it being warmer afternoon.
And people sleep late on Saturdays.
I was less concerned about that, but I'm thinking, you know, if it is winter and it's more likely that the sun will be out and it could be above freezing afternoon as opposed to before noon.
Have we forgot about the business people, or they're just not a part of this at all?
I think we can, again, just in my conversations with Gloria, I think the businesses are slammed, and I think maybe if she's around,
Okay.
from Venice Main Street, she would be an appropriate person to invite.
Yeah.
Okay.
She has to be in the next meeting, whether she goes on the walk or not.
Right. And I think this walk, as opposed to last year's walk, which was around Van Ness Business Community, I'm getting the sense that maybe we're going to want to have this walk in the residential area around the apartment buildings.
Yes.
Probably. So it's not going to be impacting the businesses quite in the same way.
Why don't
Yeah,
why don't we
can I
meet
just-
at the park? Meet at the park.
Forest Hills?
Well, we can work that out, like where, whether we meet at Forest Hills Park or Muhlenberg Park or whatnot, we can,
Okay.
but
the only thing that I'm wondering is that, I understand the temperature concern, but I'm also wondering, most of the problems, they happen, I think, towards the night. So if we walk around at 12 or 1, we might not see
Absolutely.
much.
That's a good point.
So that's the only issue. I don't remember the last time I had an issue at the Chesapeake at 11 or 12 or 1 p.m.
Mhm. That's a good point.
right, but is this right now are we doing this as a community watch event where we're specific, or is this just now during the daytime saying, here, these are places where we've had problems in the past, and kind of point that out from known previous incidents as opposed to going out right now and
I would
I
hope
guess,
it
yeah, that's
would
a good
be.
point.
because that does lead to a second, one of the things I had kind of written down in my notes, which I figured we can talk about at some point, not necessarily in this meeting, but one of the questions I was going to raise was about organizing some sort of community watch, just in general.
Yeah.
And what would it take to organize a community watch? But I figured let's start with this community walk first, and let's sort of like do an assessment of the area and maybe start, and carry that thought of a community watch effort into our next meeting, into a follow-on discussion.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Is the
If I could
commander,
interject
is the
there.
commander still there?
Yeah, I'm still here, and I thank you for bringing my name up, because I wanted to interject. If you are interested in community walks, neighborhood patrols, I highly recommend Samantha Nolan. She is a Chevy Chase resident, and she's been the chair of the 2D Citizens Advisory Council for the last 20 years. And she's also a certified trainer in neighborhood watch. And she is much better at it than I am. She gives a ton of experience, a ton of insight, and she gives it from the perspective of a citizen and a neighbor. And that's something that she does regularly. I've seen her trainings, they're excellent. And she's done one recently on Zoom for the Georgetown neighborhood. And she's a busy person, but I'm sure she'd be willing to do this for your neighborhood as well.
Commander, I have a
thank you.
question. Do we have patrol persons on bicycles in the district? I very seldom see a policeman on a bike in a neighborhood. Do we have that?
So you do not have a specific officer assigned to a bicycle patrol in Van Ness or Forest Hills,
Mm-hmm.
but there are officers that patrol on bikes. And we have officers on bicycles every day. It slightly diminishes during the colder months.
The winter. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So
Thank you for asking that question. I actually had put that in the chat because with Forest Hills Playground and Merch
Absolutely.
Playground,
Yep.
you can't see things from the road. And I know
Yep.
that at Merch, I went to go sit down and there's a crack pipe, and I twittered over to DGS and they were fantastic
Oh,
about picking it
God.
up. But, what Paul said about over by the playground with condoms, they're
Right.
just things you can't see. And I was also asking about people or officers on foot sometimes, but I don't know if you have the staff for that or if that's just impractical.
So we do have officers on foot as well, foot, bicycle, scooter, and Segway. And they are assigned to patrols depending on various needs throughout the second district.
So back, I guess one question, Commander, on this timing of this January 9th meeting, is it, I mean, from your perspective, is it better in the daytime as we started talking about, but then I think there's somebody who, I don't think his name is iPhone, but this idea of having a walk when there's actually stuff going on. And so that suggests in the evening time, which may not work for some people, but I can understand the logic of us having a walk in the neighborhood, again, when it's more prime time for stuff going on rather than the afternoon when nothing's going on. So what's your perspective?
My perspective is I would start with the daytime time frame so that you get as many people as possible and get as many voices engaged in the concerns. And then we can move to a secondary time where we could do it perhaps later at night and try to isolate where the problems are developing at night. The more people, the better is what I find.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to check before we set something and then, oh, why didn't we do it this other time? So, okay. So we have a tentative January 9th from 1:30 to 3. And Monica, is that?
Afternoon, I mean, yeah, 1 or 1:30, something like that, after lunch.
And then we can send around, I guess via email or whatever, we can send around an invite, and we'll make sure that somebody from Mary Che's office gets invited, and then Tony Donaldson, who would represent as Monica says, the executive side, the city side. And,
Yes.
and we'll go from there.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, everybody. If you could just send a confirmation email to Captain Frenzel once the location and times are set, and then he'll make arrangements to have the appropriate personnel here.
Thank you very much, Commander. We truly appreciate this, and thank you, Captain Frenzel. I think you're still on the line as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy
Yes.
New Year.
May it be a better year.
Yes.
Happy New
Let's
Year.
all hope so. Happy New Year.
Yes.
New Year.
Thanks. So have a good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Monica.
Good night.
Stay safe.
Thank you,
Stay
Marilyn.
safe.
Commander. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now what do I do? How do I
How do
turn
I
it
get
off?
out of this?